Hello, everybody. We've been having a heat wave. It has finally broken. My brains are back online, I think. And I would like to read to you from The Girl from Black Point Rock. Ice Moon 2, Day 15, 1326. She won't speak, this girl. Won't eat. She looks to be about 5 winters, but could be older. Not younger, I don't think. She's a scrawny, bedraggled scrap of a thing, with no language I can tell. My brother brought her in from last night's patrol, slung across his saddle like a sack of oats. I'd been still fuming because it had been my turn to go, only the old bitch had gone into labor, and I'm 10 times the midwife he'll ever be. Where in the name of all 10 gods did you get her? I demanded, standing with my back to the fireplace, where the bitch and her surviving pups lay on a pile of tattered rugs. The bitch, ever sensitive to human emotions, whimpered at the sound of my voice. She'd whelped 7 and lost 5 and couldn't settle. Seddon stood there, shedding clumps of snow, his arms full of child wrapped in horse blanket, and kicked the door shut behind him. Black Point Rock, which overlooked the main road leading westerly, the most likely source of men foolish enough to try raiding here in the outlands. We served the Empress as bodyguards, sometimes assassins and elite warriors. We sent as many as our compounds could sustain, and in exchange were exempt from taxes. Fighting skill was bred into us, and we trained from an early age, women and men alike. Which is why, when Seddon held out the waif to me, I knew he was thinking, Riava's good with young things, puppies, babes. She'll take this one off my hands. And I wasn't having any of it. The girl whimpered, sounding too much like the old bitch, and 2 stick-thin arms went around Seddon's neck. I grinned. Her choice, and turned my back without waiting for his answer. The bitch had ideas of her own. She hauled herself to her feet, stepping carefully around the sleeping pups, and halted a pace away from men and babe, tail wagging slowly. Her ears swiveled forward. Then she closed the distance, pawing at my brother's legs as she thrust her muzzle at the ragged bundle of child. Which is how the girl came to be curled up with the pups, warmed by the fire on one side and the bitch's body on another. Still not speaking, still refusing to eat, although for a moment there I thought she'd latch onto a teat like a wolf cub. Seddon lowered himself onto the bench opposite me. I glared at him. So we came across a party of traders, ambushed, none left alive, goods carried off, only a wagon too broken to be of use. His glance flickered to the pile of sleeping creatures by the fire. And her. Almost missed her, she was so still. Trained to silence like our own, he meant. Couldn't leave her out there to freeze, he meant. I leaned my elbows on the table and rested my face in my hands. My skin felt hot, with shame perhaps, with grief for nameless things. My brother knew me, knew my temper all too well. He'd seen me train as hard as any man among us, had fought beside me, had his sorry ass saved by my bright steel. I'm no nursemaid, I said. Never said you were, meant only that you'd know what to do. High praise indeed, and a challenge I couldn't walk away from. There were 6 women in the compound who'd set aside their swords while their children were small. Maybe one of them, but for this night, the girl was safe enough and warm, burrowed in a mound of furry bodies. Ice Moon 2, Day 17, 1326. She still won't eat, won't speak, won't eat, won't meet my eyes. Took a little water when I brought it to the bitch, then scuttled back to the pups. I went out to the snowy training yard. Ice Moon 2, day 19, 1326. She was still curled up with the pups when I came in late. The fire had gone out. The house felt like a tomb. I touched her bare skin, a bit of filthy arm where the horse blanket had fallen away. It was cold, so cold. She's dead, I thought, and a hollow, sick feeling rose up in me. Woken by my approach, the bitch shifted, raised her head, eyes blue with cataracts, licked her pups, human and canine. The girl whimpered, the first sound I'd heard out of her. I knew then that she'd die unless I did something. I knew 50 ways to kill a man and twice that many to cripple him. I knew nothing about children. On the other hand, I knew puppies. I set to work making a bottle and nipple of the sort I'd use for an orphaned newborn, filled it with heated milk from the neighbor's goat, and sat cross-legged beside the girl. The bitch and one of the pups roused at the smell of the milk. I shoved them aside, hauled the girl into my lap, and maneuvered the nipple into her mouth. Took a little doing as she flinched from my grasp, but once that first squirt of warm milk made its way down her throat, she started sucking and gulping like the half-starved wild thing she was. She drained the bottle, and then a second one a few hours later, and the next day, 5 of them. And the day after that, she held out her hands for a bowl of bone gruel. I waited until she'd finished and then took to her with a basin of warm soapy water and a pile of wash rags. The roughness must have reminded her of the bitch's tongue, for after a bit of initial resistance, and a reminder or two on my part that I was not only bigger and stronger, but knew some restraining techniques she'd never even dreamed of, she quieted down and seemed to enjoy being clean. I wrapped her in an old wool shirt of mine so she'd get used to my smell and left her curled up with the dogs. Green Moon 1, day 7, 1326. The passes will be open soon, and with that will come the requisition of skilled fighters for the coming season. Last year's service done, folks will be returning, comings and goings and dancings and feasting at the spring festival. What will she think of it, I wonder? She said her first words today. We were sitting on the threshold, the door open, the breeze bringing the scent of early growing things, the first blossoming bulbs Seddon had planted along the side of the house last year. The puppies rolled and tumbled in the yard. The dog will die tonight. I looked at her speechless. She met my gaze, and I saw then what winter's shadows and her long mop of hair had hidden. Eyes the color of new gold, knowing eyes. How long have you known how to talk? A shrug. I've always known, or just now, or since you taught me? Then I heard behind me, so soft I would not otherwise have noticed, but for her words, the faint rattle of the bitch's breathing. I turned my focus back to the girl. Do you have a name? A human name? No. A pause, a tilt of the head, considering. Call me. I will answer. My breath stopped in my throat. I knew loyalty, from warriors to empress, between bond partners, hunt mates, parent and child, siblings such as my brother and me. Never this. A human name would be a betrayal, a name like hope or trust or promise, an insult of the basest sort. We waited, she waited, watching me with those new minted eyes while I wrestled with my conscience. Defeated, I shook my head. You must choose. Then Aru. Hardly a girl's name. Hardly a name that anyone of this clan would bestow upon a child, but I did not say so. I nodded, swearing whatever God was listening, that if Seddon so much as smirked, he'd find out how much wrestling I'd been practicing all winter. I stayed up after Seddon and Aru had gone to sleep, sitting on the hearth with the bitch. Normally, we didn't light a fire this late in the season, but the bitch was so thin and her breathing so ragged, I needed to. If this was to be her final night, I wanted it to pass in comfort. She died as I stroked her. I thought long and hard of how Aru had known. True, our children learn the ways of life at an early age, but more in the way of acceptance, not foretelling. Green Moon 3, Day 12, 1326. Mikael is here, come later than the others from service by the farthing sea. And I swear by the God of fools that if he hints at a match one more time, I will throttle him. By law and custom, he is due a season of rest, and he obviously thinks I will stay behind. I cannot understand why I had passed by 3 chances at a posting. When Aru met him, she growled. Green Moon 2, Day 7, 1330. I found this journal under a pile of old training gear and sat, amazed at how much time had gone by, 4 years and more, and how much has come to pass. Aru is now full grown, or near enough to it. I must have mistaken her age. She's lean and fierce and runs with the 2 dogs, now also grown, so shaggy they look part wolf. Seddon tried to sell one to a neighboring compound for stud or war training, but Aru faced him down. Not an hour later, she and the 2 dogs had vanished, not a trace remaining, to reappear a fortnight later. She'd armed herself with spear and bow. The dogs circled her legs, snarling at anyone who drew near. That night, she and the dogs slept in the forge, and the next morning she learned to wield a hammer as well as a spear. Themis Smith says she labors as the mood suits her, disappearing into the wilds for weeks at a time. She has not lived in this house since the day she took the dogs away, or maybe they took her. Yet, when we pass, she offers me a smile and never a threat. Mikael, she all but killed. This was after she returned, and Mikael and I were shouting at one another in the training yard. He would not settle to serious sparring, and the only reason I had agreed to work with him was because my own sword skill had grown rusty with poor use. I could not afford to be any less than the best when I claimed my requisition place, but all he wanted to do was dance and flirt and draw me into his bed. I disarmed him, toppled him with a leg sweep, and offered him a hand up. He grappled me, flipping our bodies so that he lay atop me, pinning my arms and legs as he smothered me with his kisses. Before I could wriggle sufficient leverage to break his hold, his weight lifted from me. I caught a glimpse of him flying through the air, landing and sliding in the dirt, and then Aru standing astride his supine form, the point of her spear beneath his ribs, angled toward his heart. To either side, the dogs stood in deathly alertness, prey-focused. No, I cried, for he was a fool, but not an enemy. She neither said nor moved, and it was not until I heaved myself to my feet that I saw her expression. Not merely grim, I'd seen enough of that in battle. Not fierce, beyond fierce. Not even the wolves of deepest winter had a gaze so cold. Aru. I came to stand near her, although out of range should she swing that spear in my direction. It was hard to catch my breath. Aru, he is one of us. He has done no lasting hurt. Yours? Came like a growl from deep in her throat. Mine? The thought made me ill. Ours. And in that moment I realized he is one of us as you will never be. Oh, Aru. She stepped back, the dogs flowing with her as if they were of the same body, met my gaze with those luminescent golden eyes. Words dried in my mouth. I had been wrong to think that human belonging meant anything to her. So that's the beginning, and I hope it has intrigued you and that you will want to pre-order it or wait until the first of the month and then go get your copy, and that you will enjoy it, review it, let me know what you think, and come back next month for more. Bye-bye.